and then suddenly, how do you come back?
You feel like you're in a giant hole.
Exactly. So we're going to have to see how they adjust for this game. Black is going to be played by the legend, Garry Kasparov. And, well, is he going to try to hold down short, who's playing the white pieces, or will he go extremely aggressively and try to win from the beginning?
Well, again, we see he gets immediately into attack mode. One thing we'd always talk about in the classical matches, Kasparov would be someone who was wont to keeping his jacket on, keeping the watch on until it was time to get down to business somewhere in the middle of the game, especially if he was confused. If he was not confused, the jacket would not come off and the watch would not come off. I'll tell you that much. The jacket almost never comes off, as a matter of fact, because usually he's just beating on you. But in this case, he knows he's at 5 minutes already. He doesn't want any impediments, so both of those come off, and the clock has been pressed, and they have begun this game. And the move D4, it looks like. C4 actually has been played. C4, G6 quickly, and Kasparov gaining the 3 seconds, as we see there. It's called a delay, but in fact, he's getting 3 seconds once he moves. So the clock ticks down, and then he gains the 3 seconds. And Short, uncharacteristically, is thinking after the first move.
Well, there's a lot of choices here. He's not exactly calculating. He's simply trying to decide which setup do I want to play. They're going to go for this kind of non-committal English in which, well, Black now commits into the symmetrical English. A very common idea. We've seen this played, thousands and thousands of times. Black has several options. Recently, this plan with D6 and E5 has become extremely popular.
Very solid way of playing.
Extremely solid. It's one of my favorite ways of playing the symmetrical English as Black, so we're going to see if that happens. But there's other choices, of course. You can go symmetrical with Knight F6 at some point. You can play E6 and D5. There are so many choices here. And Short played this move D3.
But I have to say, all that time he spent, too, it is a blitz game, and we were expecting to see the first 5 moves be blitzed out. After all, he's played E6 instead of your plan of D6, E5 after this move D3. But he's spending, it seems, quite a bit of time on every single move here.
Yeah, I think he should have made a note in his score sheet that this is a blitz game. Maybe it would have helped him.
Wow, said tongue-in-cheek. Well, the knight has gone H3 to F4. There'll be no note-taking at this table. And 444 for Kasparov. He's already ahead, quite a bit of time on the clock. It seems simple enough for him to just castle. And like you said, maybe they're getting into blitz mode just after coming from those rapid games where you have the opportunity to think for a minute, 2 minutes. You can't do that here. You have to get into automatic mode. You watch one of the best players in the world. Number 2, I believe, on the list is Hikaru Nakamura. This guy doesn't spend more than 4 seconds on any move. I mean, he's just like clip, clip, clip.
Of course not. But I really like what Short's doing, even though it took him a little bit of time. It's a very clever setup where you first play D3 and you wait for Black to decide how he's going to develop. And this idea of playing Knight H3, F4 is specifically good against the setup with E6, Knight G7, because White controls D5. Therefore, D5 is impossible to be played. And now this idea, H4, you put some pressure on the king side. Kasparov responds with a very typical idea of H6, so that H5 can be met with G5, closing down on the king side. And the problem here for Black is that he doesn't get D5 in. So it's not as comfortable as some other options when the white knight doesn't go to F4.
Well, we just saw the move Queen D2 and B5.
Yeah, these are all common ideas. The point here is that White wanted to play B3, and Kasparov's not going to let him. He sacrifices a pawn in order to open up the queen side and to allow himself to play the very important move D5 in order to coordinate all of his pieces. So it goes a little bit on the spirit of the Benko gambit, but of course it doesn't exactly resemble it because of the pawn structure. But the idea is the same. You put a lot of pieces on the queen side, you attack that sector of the board, and since you are also controlling the center with your pawn on D5, you kind of ask Short, what's your plan?
Well, Short is answered with a plan E4 himself, looking to blast open the position. And this game has gotten rich all of a sudden. Kasparov, he like perked up when he saw the move E4 and land on the board. He's like, I sacrificed a moment ago. I'm not expecting any rich responses like this one. That's a move. Is it good, though?
It's interesting. He wants to force Kasparov to commit in the center. He doesn't want to just let this advantage of structure in the center go without any compensation. He wants to rip it apart. E4 makes sense. Is it a good move? It's not so easy to say. There are some problems with, for example, bishop a6. The knight doesn't have a lot of retreat square. Oh, he did play bishop a6.
Attacking that square and taking on d5, now attacking the knight on c6 himself. And Kasparov has taken on b5, allowing a pawn on c6, but albeit temporary, as it's been captured as well. Black is still down a pawn for the moment, but he's restraining White's position. His bishop on g7 looks excellent.
And White's going to lose his best piece, which is the bishop on g2. His structure is not happy. He has a weakness on d3. He has a lot of problems developing his queen side. So yes, he's up a pawn at the moment, but finding moves is not going to be easy. And I spoke with a lot of people about blitz chess, and sometimes it doesn't matter what the position on the board is. It matters who has the initiative. And in this case, it does feel like it's black. I would be much more comfortable finding moves for black in this position than for white, even though white is up a pawn at the moment.
But look at this last move, queen to c2, attacking the pawn on c5. And now e5 has been played, trying to displace that knight. If Short can get his bishop to the e3 square, he might be happy. And this e5 move has blocked the diagonal of his own bishop as well. Seems like a very interesting idea to push this pawn to e5.
I think he wants to take control over the d5 square, maybe even land the queen there after trading off the bishops. So he's going for a lot of space advantage. You have to realize that a2 is also hanging in a lot of variations. For example, after e5, knight e2.
Bishop takes on c6, knight takes c6.
Right, I think that was kind of forced because of the forks on d5 after the trade of bishops on g2.
Knight back to e2 has been played, guarding the entry, an incursion on d4, and now Kasparov up a pawn, but needing to maybe
down a pawn.
Down a pawn, excuse me. Maybe to prove a little bit here, because White's position is very solid. His d pawn, though, quite weak. It looks like
solid but not developed. I'm a little worried about, for example, knight b4. I think you have to take on c5. And then knight takes d3, followed by an idea like e4. I just don't believe black can be worse. There's so much pressure on the queen side. White's so underdeveloped. I'm not saying he's necessarily that much better.
Okay, rook to c8, followed by bishop to d2 instantly, and they're both feeling the pressure off the clock. And that rook leaving the a file, I'm not sure it was the best decision by Kasparov, and the bishop out to d2, and now his queen is hovering. He's played the move queen to d7, positional type move.
Right, you're attacking some of the light squares on the king side, and you never know when a queen can go to h3 and suddenly cause a lot of harm.
Rook a d1 has been played.
Rook a d1, a little passive. He just wants to control the d3 square, make sure that nothing's hanging.
And f5, f5, talk about an aggressive move in this position. That doesn't look like he was looking to build up on the queen side in any way. This is just go attack him. f4 maybe coming next with f3 and queen h3.
The plan is not subtle. It's just hard to parry.
Well,
so
now
we're gonna have
f4 in reply. Short not wanting his piece to come under attack, and king to e7, h7, and then bishop to c3. And it looks, at least for the moment, White has dealt with most of the issues, although knight to d4 could be played here.
Right, knight d4, I would assume that I don't have to actually take this knight, but I don't like leaving it either.
And Kasparov at 154 and counting, and he has played knight d4 and queen d2 in response, leaving the knight on that square. Short with a huge edge on the clock, over 30 seconds, and now e takes on f4 by
That's an interesting
Kasparov.
Interesting decision to take, because it allows me to play, for example, knight takes f4 at the moment. It also allows me to take with the rook. It gives White a couple of more options than I would have liked to do. And then, yeah, he did take with the rook. Suddenly, the knight on d4 doesn't feel as comfortable as it would in other lines. He has to make sure that the pawns on the queen side don't just become two free passed pawns. So Kasparov has to prove something.
And bishop takes on d4, c takes d4. That bishop, not exactly a picture, painting a pretty picture on the square g7.
I don't know. I'm going to get it to e3 faster than you think I am.
Well, we want to see that, but the e3 square is under attack at the moment. There is the possibility of rook to e3 at any moment, and doubling on the e-file as well.
Well, I was thinking about the move h5, bishop h6, bishop comes to e3. Very uncomfortable. The king will not be very happy about that.
Well, the rooks have doubled on the f-file, doubling down on that square. I'm not sure what the purpose there is, and now the rook has landed on e3. and he will be able to double rooks himself on the e-file. Where's the knight going to go?
I'm not entirely sure what the point of doubling. Oh, there's the point, I guess, of doubling the rooks on the f-file is to challenge the 3 square.
And now both pair of rooks doubled, and Kasparov ahead on the clock, 142 to 131. They're in a critical moment, and now knight to f4 has been played as the clocks tick down. Now queen to b7, attacking the rook on f3 and telling him to get off that square. What will he do? King g2 doesn't look great. Queen to g2, and now queen a6 hitting the a pawn, putting some pressure on the d pawn. b3 protecting the pawn, and 140 for Kasparov, 125 for Nigel.
There's a lot of pressure at the moment, but White's position is holding. There are no more real threats to make immediately, so Kasparov needs to build up his position. And I actually am not a huge fan of having put the queen on a6. So I don't know. I feel like the idea of playing h5 and bishop h6 before was a little stronger.
Well, White has not played h5. Look at that. h5 is in the position challenging Kasparov's king side.
Yeah, why not? At the moment, it seems very logical to counterattack as it is.
And what's this about? Bishop takes on f4. It looks like Short should be able to take on g6 with check.
He does.
The king, no, the queen can capture. And now pawn takes, and now the offer of a queen trade. This position looks like no way in the world White loses it. Oh, wait a minute. Now, unless a rook can appear on the g-file.
Right, there's queen h5 at the moment. It's still dangerous for both sides. Both kings a little bit exposed. I would say White's in a little bit more of danger. Rook g8 is coming. You don't want to take on e3 because I take with the pawn, and then the pawn becomes very dangerous.
Well, what's your next move?
Attack.
What's your next move here?
Well, let's see.
Maybe queen h3 is playable? No, queen h3 loses a rook, actually. Queen takes queen.
Right.
What do you do? Rook g8 is a huge threat. With 40 seconds left and ticking, Short is trying to figure out what to do about this move. Rook to g8.
Yeah, this queen h5 move, very strong. It puts pressure on the rook on f3, which doesn't allow me a lot of simple ways.
And he had decided he had to capture. And the threat is still there. Now queen to h2. Rook to g8 is on the board, king to h1, and now e2 sacrificing his queen.
That's it.
Kasparov with an amazing finish, showing his style, his skill, an amazing attacking game down upon all that time. But what a beautiful finish by Kasparov. Let's take a look at the analysis. He's looking jubilant there indeed after that victory. Just a beautiful game.
Well, it's funny because Short opened the g-file. He thought he was going to take advantage of the g-file. He played h5, h takes g6. But he didn't have to. Had he actually just, I think, taken maybe on f4 at this point with maybe the rook, he wouldn't have been doing so badly. I guess he was worried about queen takes e3. Maybe there's actually some problems already, because once he played h5, he had to reckon with the possibility that black would use the g-file for himself. I really like this h5 move when he played it, but the more I look at it, the more I'm realizing, wait a second, black's the one that's using the g-file.
Well, it was that queen on a6 that actually did it, because the queen was able to come over to that side. Let's take a look at the finish so that the fans can see why he resigned in this position. Queen takes g6, fantastic.
And the queen h5 maybe just winning.
Looks winning. I could not find a defense there.
And definitely not in a minute.
So. And after queen h2, rook check, king over e2.
And now there's no way of defending the rook, because if you just move it away, the queen comes down to f3, checkmate on the next move. If you take my queen, I promote with devastating effects, and there's just nothing else to do.
Amazing, an exciting game by Kasparov, showing his blitz skills. The next game should start in a few